Every continent has a megatheropod that stands head and shoulders above the rest in the region. North America has T-Rex. South America has Giganotosaurus. Africa has Carcharodontosaurus. Europe has Torvosaurus. Australia has not much, admittedly, but Australovenator is still the size of a bear. For a long time, we regarded Tarbosaurus bataar as the Asian champion on the global theropod stage, but new discoveries have promised to shake up the megatheropod hierarchy like never before. Not only is Zhuchengtyrannus magnus the most massive land predator in the history of Asia, it's in the running to be one of the biggest theropod dinosaurs of all time. First, a disclaimer and some acknowledgements. I'm making this video with the assistance of the paleontologists who are describing this new Zhuchengtyrannus material, so thank you to Rommel Hines, Frank, Dino W, Eric Snively, and the rest of the team for allowing me to cover the topic. I am stoked out of my mind that we finally have confirmation of another destroyer-class tyrannosaur genus, so excuse me if I get a little loud when recording the video. I'm just excited. Also, most of the measurements I'll share with you aren't published yet, and much more material is actually known that has yet to be formally described, so just know that we do have a much better idea of what the animal looks like. I'm just not allowed to talk about most of it yet, but what I can share now is incredibly exciting. Zhuchengtyrannus magnus was a powerful tyrannosauran from Campanian China, so it lived about 4 or 5 million years before Tyrannosaurus rex and on a different continent. The name means great tyrant from Zhucheng, and boy was that foreshadowing. Even when it was described way back in 2011, that was just like 2 years ago, right? It was clear that it was a powerful animal. The holotype consisted of a large maxilla and dentary that, thanks to their robust morphology and tooth shape, clearly belonged to a big tyrannosaur. That specimen is known as ZCDM V0031. ZCDM V0030 and V0032, respectively, are the numbers for a giant dentary and small maxilla found in different quarries. I don't have any measurements for the maxilla, but I do know the dentary is notably larger than that of the holotypes. It's basically the dentary giga situation, so just remember not to take skull fragment scaling too seriously. The variation in theropod dentary size between individuals can be a little absurd. I'm just letting you know that these specimens exist. There's also a giant scapula from Longgujian, measuring 89 centimeters long while damaged anteriorly. That's comparable to some T-Rex specimens like Trix and MOR 555. We can't forget the femur and tibia that come from the same site as the huge dentary. The femur and tibia measure 89 and 95 centimeters long respectively, but we don't know which individuals they may have belonged to. Now for the new stuff. Rommel's team, working with the Zhucheng Dinosaur Cultural Research Center, examined a wealth of Zhuchengtyrannus material. They found a 1.21 meter femur they referred to the holotype, which previously only had the maxilla and dentary. That 1.21 meter standard is measured from the femoral head to the lateral condyle, which using the same standard is 8% longer than the biggest Tarbosaurus femur. That's roughly comparable to a subadult Tyrannosaurus rex, although without knowing measurement standards, it's difficult to compare directly. The holotype then could be reasonably expected to mass within the 5 to 7 ton range. Definite megatheropod territory, and that's already large enough to count as the biggest terrestrial carnivore known from Asia. And no, Camp's theropod does not count. The holotype isn't the biggest Zhuchengtyrannus specimen, however, not by a long shot. That honor belongs to the famed Zhucheng dorsal vertebra, so nicknamed because Dave Hone, who described Zhuchengtyrannus, hinted in his 2011 book The Tyrannosaur Chronicles that there was tyrannosaur material from the Zhucheng quarry comparable in size to that of the T-Rex specimen Su. He posted a picture online, said it was vaguely wider than 25 centimeters, and the internet mostly forgot about it. Rommel's team did not. They relocated the gigantic vertebra, identified it as the 13th dorsal in the series, and through physical measurement and precise 3D scanning, obtained a detailed width measurement of 28 centimeters. That might not mean much by itself, and that's okay. Let's put it into perspective. The D13 of the Giganotosaurus holotype is 22 centimeters wide. The D13 of the T-Rex holotype is 27 meters wide. The T-Rex Stan's D13 is 24.3 centimeters wide. Scotty, one of the biggest T-Rex specimens, has a D13 that's 26 centimeters wide. And Su, the biggest of the decently complete Rex specimens, has a D13 that's 28.4 centimeters wide. So, Zhuchengtyrannus, typically relegated to the fringes of megatheropoddom, has referred fragmentary remains that compare favorably to some of the biggest Tyrannosaurus specimens out there. A dorsal vert that big isn't something to be ignored, and it's better for scaling than, say, a dentary. Obviously, there is individual variation to consider. CM9380, the T-Rex holotype, is smaller than Scotty, but has a bigger D13. I am nowhere near confident enough about Zhucheng's size to say that it has a definite placement compared to more complete megatheropods, but calling it roughly T-Rex sized is certainly fair. Anywhere from 9 to 11 plus tons is a reasonable ballpark estimate for the owner of the gigantic dorsal. If we scaled it isometrically from T-Rex, we'd likely end up with overestimates, since dorsal vertebrae seem to increase in size disproportional to body mass in big theropods, but the research hasn't yet been done to determine a precise scaling factor for that phenomenon. I'm satisfied with saying 9 to 11 tons, with room for a higher ceiling considering how the dorsal is bigger than Scotty's. A ton of news outlets have taken to calling it bigger than Sue, which I don't see evidence for. That's significant overclaiming. Nearly as large as Sue, or comparable to large individuals of Tyrannosaurus, is a much more responsible headline. I'd say it's likely, based on the largest material we have, that Zhuchengtyrannus magnus takes the second place on the megatheropod podium, right behind T-Rex itself, and just ahead, or possibly tied with, Giganotosaurus. That's quite the dramatic change from about 5 minutes ago when we all thought that Zhucheng was borderline 5 metric tons. Tyrannosaurians have a tendency to go Super Saiyan when nobody's looking, I suppose. What would such a monster have eaten? Meet Zhuchengtyrannus giganteus, the world's biggest hadrosaur and the herbivorous terror of Campanian China. Specimens of Zhuchengtyrannus may have weighed between 13 and 17 metric tons, comparable to the largest mammoths and elephants from the fossil record. That's a tall order for any predator, and a 6-ton Zhuchengtyrannus certainly would have preferred to focus on the very young, very old, or very ill individuals. It, of course, would be best practice for even a 10-ton Zhuchengtyrannus to take easy prey. Carnivorous animals in real life don't have anything to prove or some abstract sense of pride to appease. However, confirming that Zhucheng was gigantic, far larger than previously thought actually, demonstrates that this Chinese tyrannosaur would have been much more capable of taking down big Zhuchengtyrannus than we expected. It also may have preyed upon the 2-ton Sinoceratops and the heavily armored Sinankylosaurus. However, the dentary and maxilla I mentioned earlier, not belonging to the Zhuchengtyrannus holotype, potentially do show differences from Zhuchengtyrannus itself, although they're from the same quarry. This would imply the existence of a second large-bodied tyrannosaurian in the same environment, or perhaps an example of sexual dimorphism. If there were 2 species present, then it's possible that the so-called Zhucheng vert belongs to another tyrannosaur entirely, and that animal would be the second largest theropod instead. As far as I'm aware, there hasn't been any traction on publishing that taxon or describing it officially, so what could we call it in the meantime? Those of you who know more about Chinese history and mythology than I do, drop your suggestions in the comments. I know there are thousands of you who are salivating for an updated top 5 biggest megatheropod list, so I'll indulge you. It's fun anyway. Tyrannosaurus rex is, to the surprise of few, in the top spot. With typical adults in the 8 to 9 plus ton range and bigger specimens in excess of 11 tons, it also has a giant sample size that could be argued as cheating. After reviewing 3D scans of both Scotty and Sue, I've seen that Sue is actually the larger of the two when using equivalent measurement standards, and I hope to see publications covering that in detail soon. 'Twould be nice. Then, of course, there are fragmentary giants like Cope and Goliath. Zhuchengtyrannus magnus with Zhucheng is in second place at 9 to 11 plus tons, comparable to some of the bigger Rex specimens. However, the average size does seem to be lower, given that other specimens are more comparable to Tarbosaurus or Megacarx in the 6-ton range. Of course, the sample size is a bit small to be calculating a real average. Giganotosaurus carolinii is the most likely contender for third place, with the holotype consistently massing between 8 and 9 tons depending on the reconstruction and methodology used. We do know that more Giga material exists, with description pending. A dentary slightly larger than that of the holotype has been hyped to Kingdom Come, but knowing how dentary variability works in theropods makes me distrustful of that scaling. That principle goes for Zhuchengtyrannus too. Tyrannosaurus macraensis, if valid, is the 4th largest theropod, comparable to smaller T-Rex specimens at 7 to 9 tons. I'm still not sure if it's an actual species though, given the paucity of material and the uncertainty regarding the age of the rock layers it's from. Maybe more research will clear things up. Spinosaurinae indeterminate is the 5th largest theropod, for now. 3D modeling puts a 14.6 meter individual at around 7.4 tons, but other volumetric estimates go as high as 8.5 tons. We don't know if these fragmentary skull bits actually belong to Spinosaurus aegypticus, hence the uncertain naming scheme. There's also a piece of a toe bone with a specimen name OPH2318. It's a piece of a toe bone. Sure, it's big, but I don't know how seriously you want me to take that. So yeah, Zhuchengtyrannus magnus, or whatever Tyrannosaurian that gigantic dorsal vert belonged to, appears to have been the biggest predator to ever walk in Asia and may very well have been the second biggest predator to walk on planet Earth. Pretty neat stuff. If you enjoy paleontology analysis like this, especially videos geared towards a theropod enjoyer audience, you may want to consider subscribing. Or pre-ordering my epic paleo fantasy novel, which is available on Amazon. You know, just because I like dinosaurs, you like dinosaurs. This kind of makes sense, you know? You can receive loyalty badges and shoutouts by joining the Raptor level of the channel, and you get early access to videos if you're really fanatical and join the megatheropod level. I'm the Vividen, and I'll see you the next time a stupidly gigantic theropod drops out of nowhere and blows up Discord.